Hello and welcome to NDTV 24/7. I'm Rohit Wellington. We begin with the deeply distressing death of India's top military officer, General Bipin Rawat, in a shock helicopter crash on Wednesday morning. One of India's worst military accidents. General Rawat, a former army chief, was India's first Chief of Defence Staff, a newly created position meant to modernize and streamline the armed forces. But just 2 years into his new role, the military transport chopper he was on went down in Tamil Nadu's Nilgiri Hills as it was making a short journey from one location to another. 13 of the 14 on board have died in that crash. That includes General Rawat, his wife and his defence advisor. The reason for the crash remains unclear, but when the visuals of the wreckage first surfaced, it appeared clear that the chance of survival was slim.
The remains of the Air Force chopper carrying India's first Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, his wife and 12 others died in the crash on a steep hillside in Coonoor in Tamil Nadu. General Rawat was on his way to address faculty and student officers of the Staff College in Wellington. The crash, described as a tragic accident by the Air Force, happened around noon. The sole survivors, Group Captain Varun Singh, he's still being treated for severe burns at the military hospital in Wellington. At 9 a.m., General Bipin Rawat and 13 others left Delhi on board a special aircraft. At 11:35, General Bipin Rawat reached the Sulu Air Base at Coimbatore for a short helicopter flight to Wellington. At 11:45 a.m., the Chief of Defence Staff left from Coimbatore for the Defence Services Staff College in Wellington on board an Mi-17 V5 helicopter with 14 people, including crew on board. At noon, the Indian Air Force Mi-17 V5 helicopter crashes near Coonoor, Tamil Nadu, 14 kilometers from Wellington. Authorities will be conducting an inquiry, but many experts are surprised by the crash. The helicopter, a Russian-designed Mi-17 V5, was a recent variant and seen as reliable.
It's a wonderful helicopter. I've flown thousands of hours on this helicopter in the most challenging terrain of this country, from the Siachen Glacier to everywhere else. And as far as the helicopter is concerned, it's one of the finest for our requirements in the country.
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh visited General Rawat's residence in Delhi after briefing the Prime Minister. The Rawats have 2 daughters. Later at 6 p.m, the Indian Air Force confirmed in a tweet that General Bipin Rawat, his wife Mrs. Madhulika Rawat and 11 others have died in the crash. In the evening, the Prime Minister chaired a top-level security meeting with the top 4 ministers as well as the National Security Advisor. The remains of the General, his wife and others will be brought to the national capital tomorrow. NDTV Bureau Report.
And Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin visited the Defence Services Staff College in Wellington, where he recorded his condolences. The Chief Minister was also briefed by the Air Force officers on this crash. General Rawat and his wife will be cremated on Friday in Delhi cantonment. Their bodies are expected to arrive in the national capital in a military plane by Thursday evening. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will be making a statement on the helicopter crash in both Houses of Parliament on Thursday. General Rawat, India's first Tri-Services Chief, was also part of the planning and execution of major operations over the past few years. He was Army Chief when India carried out airstrikes targeting the Jaish Terror Training Centre in Pakistan's Balakot in February 2019, days after over 40 soldiers were killed in a terror attack in Pulwama in Jammu and Kashmir. General Rawat also supervised a cross-border counter-insurgency operation in neighbouring Myanmar in 2015.
63-year-old General Bipin Rawat led the Indian Army and then the military as India's first Tri-Services Chief for the last 5 years. A very challenging period which saw fatal clashes with Pakistani and Chinese troops and many other crises. He took over as Army Chief in December 2016 after superseding 2 seniors. He was selected for his experience in cross-border strikes. In 2015, following the killing of 18 Indian soldiers in an ambush by Naga rebels, The Indian forces responded with cross-border strikes and the responsibility of coordination was on Lieutenant General Rawat. General Rawat took over as army chief in the aftermath of the strikes across the line of control in September 2016 conducted by India after Pakistani-based groups attacked an army camp in Uri. Earlier that year, terrorists had attacked the Air Force base in Pathankot.
I said the surgical strikes were a message that we had communicated, and that if required and if the adversary does not behave, then if we have to continue with these kind of activities and events, we will continue.
In his tenure after the horrific Pulwama bomb attack in which 40 CRPF personnel were killed, India carried out second cross-border attack against a terror camp in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. An escalation which led to a counter-attack by Pakistan's Air Force which was repelled by India. Later that year, on his retirement, General Rawat was appointed as India's first Chief of Defence Staff. But already the tension with China was building up on several fronts. In Arunachal Pradesh with repeated face-offs, in Doklam, in Bhutan across the Sikkim border where the Chinese built a base, and most crucially in many areas in Ladakh. Along the line of actual control, repeated confrontations flared up with the Galwan clash in which a colonel was among 20 Indian soldiers and several Chinese reportedly. This was the first fatal clash with China since the 1962 war. General Rawat's biggest strategic challenge was the possibility of war with India's nuclear-armed neighbours. Key to this was updating India's arsenal both with indigenous and foreign weapons, including more and more from the US.
Constant friction with two of our nuclear-armed neighbours, with whom India has fought wars, increasingly acting in collision, poses an omnipresent danger of regional strategic instability with the potential for escalation, threatening our territorial integrity and strategic cohesion.
During his term, the government also pushed for making roads, bridges, homes in border areas. Internally, not one to shy away from controversy, General Rawat cut through red tape and honoured Major Litul Gogoi for tying up a Kashmiri stone pelter to his vehicle as a human shield to evacuate polling staff. The Major was awarded the Chief of Army Staff Commendation Card. During the movement against the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act, across the country he publicly condemned those who were leading the protests and said, leadership wasn't about guiding people to carry out arson and violence.
Leaders are not those who lead people in inappropriate directions, as we are witnessing in a large number of university and college students, the way they are leading masses of crowds to carry out arson and violence.
General Rawat's tenure has also seen a landmark change with doors opening for regular commission of women in several sectors.
Well, the training of the women soldiers in the Indian Army in particular has been hard, and it has held them in good stead in performing their tasks in various kinds of terrain that we have in our country.
The distinction between the role of men and women today in war fighting is getting blurred by the day. The notion of gender gap is passé. Women are no less suited to braving such challenging conditions and have proven themselves in the past and will continue to do so in the future.
As the Chief of the Tri-Services, General Rawat had begun to plan for a better coordination between the three forces, especially in long-term procurement. He had a year of service left.
Shifting focus now, there was a show of strength by opposition parties in parliament as leaders from the Congress, TMC and NCP joined the dharna against the suspension of 12 MPs. Meanwhile, a massive political row exploded over PMO's Lal Topi tweet quoting the Prime Minister's attack against Akhilesh Yadav. The opposition slammed that tweet. Akhilesh Yadav said red symbolizes revolution. A show of strength of opposition parties. Leaders and MPs from the Congress, TMC and NCP joined the ongoing dharna in Parliament in protest against the suspension of 12 of their colleagues in the Rajya Sabha. This a day after Shiv Sena's Sanjay Raut met Rahul Gandhi to push for a united anti-BJP opposition.
आज फिर हमने वही मुद्दा उठाया और हम उनको ये कहा कि ठीक नहीं है, कृपया करके आप सस्पेंशन को रिवोक करो। फिर एक बार मैं अपील करता हूं, हम सदन चलाने को तैयार है कि आज हम सभी पार्टी के लोग हाउस बाइकआउट करके।
The opposition also seemed galvanized after the PMO's official handle tweeted out the Prime Minister's stinging Lal Topi comments aimed at the Samajwadi Party, alleging that the SP was soft on terrorists. MPs from Samajwadi Party, including Akhilesh Yadav, wore red caps to Parliament today.
ये नई भाषा नहीं है। लाल टोपी के बारे में या लाल रंग के बारे में उत्तर प्रदेश के मुख्यमंत्री जी पहले भी बोल चुके हैं। ये लाल रंग इमोशंस का है। भारतीय जनता पार्टी इमोशन नहीं समझती। लाल रंग क्रांति का भी है, लाल रंग बदलाव का भी है।
Earlier in the day, while addressing Congress MPs, Congress President Sonia Gandhi attacked the BJP-led government, calling it insensitive to the sufferings of the people.
तो एक तो पॉलिटिकल स्टेटमेंट है। पीएमओ के ऑफिशियल हैंडल से इसको करना उचित नहीं है।
Though the opposition parties came together to protest against the suspension of their MPs, the government stood unaffected in its business as the differences between Congress and TMC outshadowed the show once again. With camera person Prem Singh, this is Arvind Gunasekar for NDTV.
Farmers who have spent the last 15 months protesting the farm laws and pushing for a legal guarantee for MSP could scale down their agitation after accepting what they called a second draft proposal from the government, which they claim includes assurances on MSP and withdrawal of police cases. Farmer leaders have said that they have accepted the revised draft given by the centre over their demands and that they will hold a meeting again on Thursday as soon as they receive a formal letter from the centre.
कल सरकार से जो ड्राफ्ट आया था उसके बारे में हमारी चिंता थी कि अभी तो सरकार कह रही है पहले आंदोलन खत्म करो फिर हम मुकदमे वापस लेंगे, ये तो सशर्त था। चिंता ये थी कि सिर्फ 2 राज्यों का जिक्र था। चिंता ये थी कि सरकार की विभागों का तो जिक्र है, एजेंसियों और समर्थकों के खिलाफ जो मुकदमे हैं उसका क्या होगा। मैं विस्तार में जाए बिना कह सकता हूं कि सरकार के आज के प्रस्ताव में इन सब बिंदुओं को एड्रेस किया गया है।
The prices of tomato have skyrocketed in South India after crops were hit by heavy unseasonal rainfall. How is it impacting the vendors and consumers? Sneha Koshi reports from Thiruvananthapuram.
Tomatoes selling at the unprecedented price of 125 rupees a kg at some wholesalers in Thiruvananthapuram. In several other parts of Kerala, tomatoes at a wholesale price of 120 rupees per kg.
ഇവിടെ വന്നിട്ട് ഒരു 35 വർഷമായി മലക്കറി കച്ചവടം നമ്മൾ ഈ 35 വർഷത്തിനിടയിൽ ഇത്ര ലെവലിൽ പോയിട്ടില്ല.
Lalita, a small-scale farmer, says the recent heavy rainfall in Kerala and the subsequent flooding has destroyed crops, causing her a loss of 1 lakh rupees. Now she is herself buying vegetables from the Chalai market in Thiruvananthapuram, but much less than the usual quantities. Half a kilo 60 rupees. സാധാരണ ഇവിടെ വരുമ്പോ So she usually would buy 2 kilos of tomato, 1.5, 2 kilos of tomato. Today she has bought only half a kilo of tomato. Most vegetables at wholesale markets in Kerala come from Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, both hit by the heavy rainfall.
പ്രാഫിറ്റിംഗ് ചെല്ലുമ്പോൾ ഇതിക്ക് മുമ്പ് 600 രൂപ 500 രൂപ 600 രൂപ മാന്യമായി കിട്ടിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ ഒരു മാസം ആയതുകൊണ്ട് നമുക്കത് പ്രോഫിറ്റേ ഇല്ല. ഒരു ബോക്സ് തക്കാളി എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ 25 കിലോ തക്കാളി ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് നെറ്റ് വെയിറ്റിൽ കിട്ടും. ഇന്ന് 3000 രൂപ വില.
This price rise is a continuing saga of diminishing profits for small-scale vendors, businesses, and how households are being forced to eat into their own savings at a time when everyone seems to be hit financially because of the pandemic. Far away from the wholesale market, this mid-sized hotel, facing a 10% increase in daily expenses, has taken tomato curry off its menu.
പക്ഷേ ഇപ്പോൾ വെജിറ്റബിൾസ് എല്ലാത്തിനും നല്ല വില, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് തക്കാളി ഇപ്പോൾ എബവ് 130 എബവ് ആണ്. തക്കാളി കറി തന്നെ നിർത്തി. തക്കാളിക്ക് വില കാരണം കൊണ്ട് തക്കാളി കറി, തക്കാളിയുടെ വേറെ പ്രൊഡക്റ്റ് എല്ലാം.
With camera person SP Babu, Sneha Koshi for NDTV.
To Puducherry now, where there have been protests against a road project. The protesters say that the project will lead to felling of trees and they want the plan altered. The foundation building the road says that they will transplant trees that may need to be removed. Sam Daniel reports on the standoff.
Protests in the tranquil enclave of Auroville, 3 hours south of Chennai, over a 4-kilometer long ring road that's meant to connect different communities in the township. The road, called the Crown Project, is being built by the Auroville Foundation, which runs Auroville. But some residents say the road would cut through a part of a forested area and a youth center. They want the plan slightly altered.
One is a low-lying area which is at the head of a watershed. So where we need to capture water, we need to have plantation that makes the water percolate, and that we need to work on how to protect the watershed there.
But the Auroville Foundation say the road is part of the master plan of the township as envisioned by Auroville's founder. They say the residents were well aware that the road will cut through some of the forested areas, but went ahead and created plantations anyway.
What you should know also is that for each tree that will be removed, 4 trees will be planted somewhere in the green belt.
A feeling of entitlement which has slowly crept up in the community. In Auroville, we are not landowners, we are not owners of the apartments we live in. We are actually just caretakers towards managers. At this point, the master plan stands and we intend to continue and implement it.
The foundation says they will transplant trees that may need to be removed or plant fresh saplings. But protesters are adamant that no tree will be removed. As the standoff continues, construction of the road remains suspended as protesters have stalled the construction of the road, even as both sides try to ease the deadlock. At Auroville with Palaniswamy and Suresh, Sam Daniel, for NDTV.
And finally, sports news now. Rohit Sharma has been appointed captain of the Team India in one-day internationals on Wednesday, taking over from Virat Kohli. Rohit Sharma will be captaining India in ODIs and in T20 internationals. Rohit Sharma will be the new vice-captain of the Test team. 18-member Test squad has now been announced for the South Africa tour. Rohit, Rahul, Pant, Shami, Bumrah, Shardul, they are back in the team. Rahane, Pujara and Ishant have been included despite poor form. Jadeja, Shubman Gill are injured. Akshar Patel has a stress fracture. Jadeja in fact has a ligament tear and could be out for a few months. The team will leave for South Africa on the 16th of this month. Well, that's it on this bulletin from the entire team. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.